Hello, and welcome to Turn Zero Loss, hosted by the Magic Engineers. My name is Eli, and I am joined here today by Sherry and David. We're doing a little bit of an intro to our channel to kind of give you an idea of who we are and what type of Magic players we are, and why the heck we call ourselves the Magic Engineers. Sherry, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been playing Magic for about probably 5, 6 years now. I'm a manufacturing engineer by day and a Magic podcaster by night now. And I just like playing Commander. I like playing all formats if I have the opportunity to, if people have decks. But yeah, what kind of player are you, David?
So I'm David. Hi. I am a systems engineer slash network engineer slash computer networking specialist. And what I do usually, my formats are Commander, obviously, with everyone else, but I like mixing it up with Pauper. I'd mix it up with Modern, Pioneer, a little bit of Standard here and there, depending. Also really like Limited. I've been playing since around Return to Ravnica blocks, so like probably close to 10 years now at this point.
That is correct.
Yeah, so I don't want to say I've been playing this game for a while, but I mean it's been a constant through a good chunk of my life. So
You're not just a Pauper boomer, you are a Modern boomer.
I'm also a Modern boomer as well. Yes.
Eli?
Yeah, so I'm a pretty simple man who likes simple things. I am a Johnny Combo player, but my day trade is electrical engineering. I do a lot of stuff with automation design, optimization for automation, all that fun stuff that you probably all don't really care that much about. But in terms of my Magic gameplay, I do a lot of control and conquering. So I like to maintain the board in a certain state, keep it at a very everyone around the same level until I can get the upper edge. I'm very much a power gamer. Don't really dive into CDH too much. I try to stay away from it, but I have very optimized decks.
So David, what kind of gameplay do you like? Like, are you a
Um,
mid-range player? Are you a combo player? What kind of player are you?
So I'm very much the mid-range fellow. I like my value. I like drawing cards. I like getting synergies. I like shading effects. I like 5 to 6 card combos that take the entire game to set up, but are ridiculously fragile. But they're fun for me because I just it's a testament to creativity and brewing. To me, Magic is more art than science, so I like to approach it with that mentality. In terms of like my strength levels, like I can power game should I desire to do so, and there are plenty of decks that cater to that mindset, but at the same time, I'm also liable to build something like a Pauper Commander Sliver deck, you know? So I like to do things that are a little offbeat and a little off the beaten track and play around with it. So mid-range is like the thing I usually play, but if I want to mix it up with, a nice aggressive big stompy deck, I can do that. Or if I want to mix it up with a blue deck that runs 30 plus counter spells, I definitely have one of those. So, you know, I can go any which way, but the style I like playing most is mid-range and get oodles of value.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Sherry.
Well, most of my decks end up being a tempo control type of game plan where I'm setting the pace of the game, make sure everyone's keeping up with me rather than they're getting ahead of me. It's like I like power game a little bit. I like to win, frankly, but I'm not obnoxious about it. But I do make a lot of decks. I'm a habitual brewer and I like all sorts of builds. I'm like a spice of life in terms of my deck building. In terms of my non-competitive decks, I like all types of game plans: aggro, control, mid-range, really Timmy decks, decks that are basically unplayable but are around a very certain idea that I try to reach to. So I like everything. I can appreciate any type of gameplay like a fine wine.
Very nice. So usually our decks that we build are on that scale that we all like to imaginarily call from 0 to 10, or I guess 1 to 10. So we sit around and some of us sit around an 8. So a lot of our decks could be a lot lower than that based on just how we pilot them, but we sit around the upper end. We're not, like I said before, we're not reaching into CDH, but we do have decks that could try to keep up with CDH if we so desired. David, why don't you walk us through a little bit about the build philosophy for your decks that you make?
Sure. So I'm gonna speak specifically about EDH because with Modern and Pauper and so on and so forth, that stuff's a lot more limited. But when it comes to EDH, the first thing I look for is I look for a commander that does something that I think is really cool or does something that is kind of different and weird and does it in unique ways. So for instance, Brothers War came out not too long ago, so I really wanted to build a deck around Takassia, Dixide Mentor. And I look at the card, I think about, okay, what can I do to maximize its potential? What can I do to get as much value out of it as possible to proceed with my game plan? And usually I like to go through Gatherer and find things that I want to do with it, or EDH Rec sometimes, but usually it's Gatherer. I just dig through that and find weird, interesting cards that fit really well with the mechanic that the commander has in mind. In addition to that, there's also like some pet cards or some weirder cards or some combos that fit in that color identity that I want to try and haven't gotten to. I'll throw those in as well as a, sort of a sneaky alternate win condition. And the big cards I look for usually are interaction, getting tons of cards at once, and find some kind of outlet to, I guess I view the game as like a pressure buildup where it just kind of accumulates steadily and steadily throughout the game. And then if you go to win, you release that pressure. And that's how I look for, like, basically an outlet to release that pressure onto the opponents and end the game. If we're talking in terms of budget, that kind of depends wildly on the deck that I want to do. Like, again, I mentioned earlier, I built a Pauper Commander Sliver deck. That deck's never going to exceed $100 ever. But for something a little more pricey or a little bit more crazy, I'm more flexible on it. But my hard limit is usually around $500. Or, depending on whatever, again, it depends really on what I want to do with it. But I don't play CDH, so I never really have to go that deep into that budget side.
Nice.
Eli, what's your build philosophy?
Usually, the way I work is that sometimes I'll see a card get spoiled or see a card get previewed. I'll pull a card and it'll kind of speak to me, or it'll tell me a way that I want to play the game. So I started diving into that. I usually use EDH Rec as a kind of a good database to kind of find the cards that synergize the best with it. 'Cause for me, I like to build decks that are very synergistic, things that work well together, that lead into the game plan that the deck is trying to accomplish in the end. Whether that be through combat victories, alternate win cons, mill, anything like that, I try to stay focused on those game plans as best as I can without deviating on that path too often. There's also cases where I will make a deck that has no game plan. It's not very optimized at all, but it's there for fun. A good example of that would be a deck that is solely around dungeons and rolling dice, for which I call Dungeon Dice Monsters. Nobody understands why the deck does what it does, but I'm gonna get it one of these days. It's really cheap now. A lot of times what I'll do is I try to go through my bulk and my binders to see if they have the cards for the deck before I start purchasing, but usually that affects the budget a little bit. So that makes my budget hover around $200 if I'm lucky. Sherry, what about yourself?
So the way I build the deck is first I will take one thing I want to build the deck around. So I'll take one card or a small group of cards and look at it. It's okay, I want to build around this, see how I can develop synergy in less conventional ways, sometimes in more direct ways if there happen to be more common cards. I start there and start working out. And then usually I actually shy away from the most common commanders of the format just because everyone knows what they do. Everyone wants to remove them, but I like looking a little deeper. Maybe it's this synergy is actually pretty well. Why is there only 500 decks made with this, or 40 in one of my decks? But I start with a plan of what I want to achieve, and then I figure out what do I want to deem a win in this deck, because a couple of my decks aren't about just winning; they're about doing something. For example, I have a tapped tribal deck that's sole goal is to tap my creatures and untap with Halo Fountain. Is that a competitive deck? Absolutely. But I have to work towards it, and I have to build with a bunch of unconventional cards to try to win with it. And then I start developing around that. It's okay, now that I have this strategy, what am I going to do? What cards do I need to make it win? Do I want this to have a combo finish? Do I want this to just be beating down people, attacking them, or even something else? Am I trying to Warsaw win this? So it's just kind of It's based on what exactly I'm trying to do. Usually my budgets run between $100 to $400. I buy a lot of singles. So a lot of the cards I already own. So I don't spend as much when I'm actually brewing and putting together a deck, because I already generally have all these cards in my binders. I just throw them together because I believe that all Magic cards should be played. And sometimes it actually comes out to very cheap decks as well. I've had a deck come out to like $50 that I've made accidentally.
So some of the stuff that you can expect to see on this channel, you can expect to see things like deck techs, us talking about the Magic lore, the various things that are happening in the Magic world right now, interesting tech within EDH itself, some of the meta that's in the EDH world that keeps ever changing because new cards are constantly printed. Are we professional Magic players? No, not at all. We like to have fun. We respect the game a lot, despite some of our personal grievances with the design philosophies of Wizards, some of the
Business
philosophies.
direction, story
Yeah.
writing, art. No, not art. We like the art,
There's a lot of things we have issues with, but we still love the game regardless.
despite its best efforts.
So that's us. We are the Magic Engineers. We hope that you enjoy whatever journey you make through our channel. Hopefully you can like, subscribe, comment on the video. Tell us a little bit about yourself if you really want. Tell us how you agree, disagree with our design philosophies. Tell us that we're wrong, please. We encourage that.
I'm sure someone will say I'm wrong.
Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Lost Turn. We will be posting whenever we make new episodes, and we also have some commentary on there about the current Magic environment as a whole. We hope you enjoy and have a good day.